1954, the Missouri Compromise was repealed by the Kansas-Nebraska Act. That was unfortunate. Do you remember the Lincoln-Douglas debates, right, in our history classes? That's what the issue was about. You had Stephen Douglas, right, Southern intellectual. He was on the camp of John C. Calhoun and Alexander Stephens, that slavery was a positive good. Here was his argument. He says, you know what? If a state wants slavery to be legal, let them decide. Let the people decide. Right? If they don't, let them decide. But you guys see what happens, right? The Missouri Compromise already said. It says, no, any state north 3630, right, is going to be what state? Yeah. But if you allow the Kansas-Nebraska Act, it's going to repeal that. Because now, what if Louisiana decides we want to vote for slavery? Then it repeals the old law. So that was the debate, and Lincoln was against that. So that was a debate between Lincoln and Douglas. Douglas' argument was called popular sovereignty, where, hey, if the majority of people in the state want slavery, let them vote it in. If they don't, let them vote for that. Unfortunately, that was passed in 1854. It's called the Kansas-Nebraska Act. 30 years later, Missouri Compromise was declared unconstitutional in the Dred Scott case, one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in the history of the United States. Lincoln-Douglas debates. I'm going to read that to you. Obviously, it's too small, but here's how Lincoln, one of my other heroes, Abraham Lincoln, here's how Lincoln felt about that decision, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. He says, repealing the Missouri Compromise. Repeal all compromises then. He says, repeal the Declaration of Independence. He says, repeal past history. You still cannot repeal human nature. It still will be the abundance of man's heart that slavery extension is wrong. And out of the abundance of his heart, his mouth will continue to speak. So those are his strong thoughts against the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Justice Roger Taney, this was the Dred Scott case. So as you can see, you're seeing this build-up to like a battle of ideologies there between North and South. So it's really based on slavery. Some people will say, well, it's states' rights. Sure, states' rights to preserve what institution? Slavery. Yeah. The Southerns would vote states' rights, but states' rights to preserve the institution of slavery. So Justice Roger Taney, this is a pretty bad decision, worst decision ever in the history of the court. He says that, in the opinion of the court, in the history of the times, the language of the Declaration of Independence showed that neither the class of persons who have been imported as slaves, nor their descendants, whether they have become a free person, even free slaves, he talked about them. He says whether they're free or not, were then acknowledged as a part of the people, nor intended. So when acknowledged as part of the people, he's saying they were not intended to be included in the general words used in the instrument of the Declaration of Independence. They had for more than a century before been regulated as beings of an inferior order. So I believe Africans were inferior order, and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations. And so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the African might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. So what does that sound like? What argument we talked about earlier? The positive, what argument of slavery? Thank you, yes. The positive, good argument of slavery. So Justice Taney, Roger Taney, was in alignment with major Southern intellectuals there. So here was Lincoln's response. House divided speech, right? He uses the Bible as a metaphor. Right? So in his House divided speech, the great Abraham Lincoln says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the union to be dissolved. I do expect the house to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the others. It will become all free or all slave. Either the opponents of slavery will arrest the further spread of it and place it where the public mind shall rest in the belief that it is in the course of ultimate extinction, or its advocates will push it forward till it become alike lawful in all states, old as well as new, north as well as south. So now you see the tension building and rising. Obviously, we know who won, thankfully, right? Divine providence, right? So, Civil War amendments, you have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Remember I talked about? America had great moral foundations in the Declaration, but we had holes. We're not perfect. We had slavery. And these amendments filled some of those holes. Right? The 13th Amendment got rid of slavery, right? And no involuntary servitude. So it filled that hole up. Then you have the 14th Amendment. Everybody has equal protection under the laws. Remember we talked about that? Equality under the law. So the 14th Amendment just asserted what's already there in our Declaration of Independence. It just says we all have equal protection of laws regardless of race. Done. And the 15th Amendment, voting rights. Right? Your right to vote shall not be hindered based on your skin color. That's it. So it filled the holes. And all these amendments did was just assert what was already there in our Declaration. Done. So what shapes America today? So I wanted to present this to you to see what leads to civil war. Right? Battle, you see, it first starts with ideology. When we do not have agreement with what our principles are, right, we become tribal. Right? When we as Americans do not share common values, common principles, it leads to tribalism. And that's why I tremble for my country. If I'm around 50, 60 years, your grandkids are going to be around 80 years, maybe 100 years. Right? What society are they going to live under? Right? So it is up to us to maintain liberty and freedom. So what shapes America today? It's an intellectual battle. The problem is that we don't believe. There are many of our politicians, many of our congressmen, politicians who do not believe that this is a sacred document. That's the problem. We have to first return back to this. Right? They think this is a document for the dinosaurs. Right? Let's throw it away.
It's our foundation.
Exactly. That's the foundation. They want to tear down the foundation. They have already probably done that. So, historicism and relativism, that's a big threat to America. That there are no universal, self-evident truths. Truth is all what? Relative. Right? This ideology, and some people call this moral relativism. This ideology is an assault to civility, to our country. Because if you say that all objective truth is relative to you or subjective to you, then there is no truth. Right? But I believe those principles of the Declaration are self-evident truths. All men are created equal. So if there is no truth, individuals who believe in this ideology say we can make our own truth, and it can be whatever I want it to be. What if it's something worse? Right? The Declaration, these have to be our guiding principles. That's what Abraham Lincoln said. They should guide us in our decision making. If I'm a politician, if I'm a citizen, we have to appeal to these principles. The administrative state. So that's also a problem. The size and scope of the government has been what in the past few years? Has gone what? Up or down? Yes.
Way up.
Yes. That is due to the administrative state. And that's when I talked about the plenary powers. The first person to talk about that was one of the worst presidents in American history. His name is Woodrow Wilson in 1912, early 1900s. Woodrow Wilson was the first president to criticize our founding fathers and the Constitution. The very first president. He's the one that led to the idea, the buildup of the modern administrative state and the plenary powers idea that the government can do whatever it wants. If there's no law telling the government it can do something, it can do it. It has free reign. So that is a problem there. And I always love to go to primary source documents to support my views. So here's a speech called What is Progress by Woodrow Wilson. And I have some major highlights that I'm going to read to you. I'm not going to read that whole thing, but I'm going to read the major highlights. So, here's what Woodrow Wilson, he believes in what's called the social Darwinist theory of the Constitution. The social Darwinism of the Constitution. That it's a living organism. The founding fathers believe, no, the Constitution is fixed, it's mechanistic, it's there just to protect your rights and liberties, that's it. Woodrow Wilson didn't like that idea. He says this, we are not bound, this is a speech, What is Progress? He says, we are not bound to adhere to the doctrines held by the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He says, we are free as they were to make and unmake government. We are not here to worship men or a document. So he was one of the first presidents to criticize our founders in the Constitution. So he believed that the Declaration was only, this is what we talked about, relativism, right? The principles of the Declaration were good for their times, but we need new freedoms. We need to be free from fear, free from want. Therefore, we need the powers that be to provide these services for you. So you can be free from fear and free from want. So he was the intellectual and the president, the leader, that started this idea of the modern administrative state. He also said this, just have a few more highlights, that's it. The Constitution was founded on the law of gravitation. The government was to exist and move by virtue of the efficiency of checks and balances. Of course, yeah. The founding fathers wanted to be gridlock, so things don't change so fast all the time. So Woodrow Wilson was aware of that. But he says the trouble with this theory of government is that government is not a machine. He says, but a living thing. Have any of you heard of this idea of the living constitution?
Yes.
That began with Woodrow Wilson. He says, the government is not a machine, but a living thing. It falls not under the theory of the universe, but under the theory of organic life. Stalin was a social Darwinist, Hitler was a social Darwinist, and look at Woodrow Wilson. It is accountable to Darwin, not Newton. He says, evolution is the scientific word. To interpret the Constitution according to Darwin principle, a Darwinian principle. That was what Woodrow Wilson said. He says, all they ask is recognition of the fact that the nation, that America, is a living thing and not a machine. So he believed that the government's job is that the separation of powers, the president has his power, Congress has their power. That's not making the government be active in getting things done. But the founding fathers, they want government to get things done, right? They want government to be active in all aspects of your life. No, right? They want a government to be more hands-off. Woodrow Wilson didn't like that idea. He said, the government, now times have changed, the government needs to be more involved. Yes?
Got a question real quick. So he's actually the one who started with the living, saying it's a living document.
Yes.
So they could change it.
Exactly.
That's exactly that's where it started.
That's where it started. That's the origin, yes. So he believed the Constitution was a living thing. He's saying, you know what, all these checks and balances, separation of power, the government's not getting enough done. We need the government to be more active in our lives. That was his philosophy. He believed that these separation of powers, we need all three branches to work together as one. Whereas the founding fathers says, whoa, 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 we want ambition to counteract ambition. We don't want them all to work together as one. But he didn't like that. So he believed that the legislature, judicial, and executive need to work as one to get more programs and policies passed, to be more involved in our lives. So that was his ideology and view of the government, and he has been successful, very successful. Because then you have FDR, you have LBJ, you have other presidents following him that have implemented a lot of his ideologies. So what's happened here is you have the living constitution, and what he believed that the government is an embodiment of the will of the people. Right? We need to be the director in the will of the people. That's why in the past 100 years, notice you've seen populist type of presidents. Our founding fathers hated this idea of populism. They feared that the president, that's why a lot of our early founders, they didn't give a lot of public speeches or public addresses. They said, no, my goal is to protect the Constitution and enforce the laws. That's it. I'm not here to go out in the pulpit and try to pander to people. Vote for me and I'll give you stuff. Right? They thought that was a demagogue. That was what my father had to do in Afghanistan. The leaders would say that. I will give you stuff. Put me in power. Right? So the founding fathers did not like that whole